the most powerful 500-watt radio station in America.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
1460 WVOX.
Stay tuned now for Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome, everybody, to Westchester Eye on the Radio. I'm Peter Moses with my co-host John Sharan and Ardina Seward. How are you guys today?
Doing great.
Outstanding.
Well, that scares me, John, when you have that level of sardonic enthusiasm. But I guess we're all going to have to live with that. I won't have to for 3 weeks, though. After this show, I am going to be traveling for 12 days.
To Europe.
At the end of the week, we're going to Germany and northern France and 2 days in Paris, a city that if I never saw again, I'd be fine with.
I agree with that.
Other members of my family love Paris. But we have with us today, now Paris is a city that's having a lot of issues with terrorism, but they've also had issues with pollution. The Seine has been polluted for generations, just like the Thames.
And they have two major airports there.
And they have two major airports in Paris. And we have with us today someone who the airport situation in Westchester County, which is at the confluence of White Plains, Purchase, part of Greenwich, and Portchester, has become a landmine for politicians and for people alike. And we have with us today Carolyn Cunningham, and Carolyn is both a environmental attorney and obviously an opponent of Westchester County's airport expanding beyond where it already has. And I don't know, I mean, you grew up within 10 miles of the airport, so you remember when we were kids, Ardina, that we have some planes flying overhead. And I grew up maybe 3 miles or 4 miles from the airport. And the flight path sometimes went directly over King Street, and I lived off of King Street with my family. But now, if I go visit my mother, I can see people in the planes, because I think they're maybe 300 feet or 200 feet off the ground by the time they get there. And it's noise pollution, it's visual pollution, and I can't believe, I know it's probably good for the bottom line in Westchester, but I don't think it's good for anything beyond the bottom line. And Carolyn, why don't you express for yourself what your issues are? I'm only going to have 3 minutes for our first break, so I'm sorry for that.
Okay, I would be glad to, because I was telling Ardina before the show that I have been involved with the Westchester County Airport since the 1980s, and we got a very special legal agreement following a lawsuit then that was very important to Westchester County Airport, because it gave us the settlement with the airlines, which they signed in a legal agreement to limit the number of commercial passengers and the number of operations out of the airport. And that predated a 1990s law that gave the FAA all power over local control of the airports. So we are, in fact, grandfathered in, as lawyers say, before the 1990 law. And that gives us the ability in Westchester County to try to keep our airport small and not have it grow as FAA wants all the airports in the country to be allowed to grow.
Well, we have a Republican county executive who has been linked from time and again to Donald Trump, who believes in small government but lots of power. I'm stunned that Astorino hasn't hired attorneys to try to roll back the law to where it conforms with all the other airports across the country.
Well, I would be, that's a federal law, and he can't roll it back. But on the other hand, it doesn't control us, because we have this agreement which we environmentalists pushed for the Board of Legislators to pass for 10 years and then 20 years. And then he, as Astorino was a legislator in 2004, voted for including this TUR, a terminal use restriction, into the county law in 2004 when he was a legislator.
But he's not now. And,
no.
And you know, sometimes there's a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that seems to be the case with him.
Well, he would like to privatize the airport, which could allow him to make some money on the airport. Nowadays, any money...
Wait, excuse me, a question. Not him.
The county. The county would be able to take some of the funds from the airport, which they cannot currently do. And that we don't have many privatized airports. I think only one in the U.S., but that would allow the county government to take money out of the airport.
Okay, well, Carolyn, we're going to have to come back and talk more about Westchester County Airport, the environmental concerns, which I guess they're both pollution in terms of the jet fuel and whatever comes with that, and also the noise pollution, and the fact that we don't want our roads clogged any more than they already are with more commuters coming in and out of that airport on jets. This is Westchester Eye on the radio on WVOX, WVOX.com. We'll be right back after this Fox News break and Fox Business News break.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to our weekly discussion of issues relating to Westchester and the surrounding area. I'm John Sharan along with Ardina and Peter. And today in studio we have a special guest, Carolyn Cunningham, lawyer and environmentalist with the Federated Conservationists. And Carolyn is here talking about the issues relating to Westchester County Airport. Carolyn, before the break, you were talking a little bit about how there is an agreement, and that agreement basically predates the FAA taking control of airports. And so as a result, there's an agreement there that they can't seem to get around through normal channels. Why don't you tell us, first off, who are the parties involved in the agreement?
Well, the county was the party and of a lawsuit in the 1980s with the then airlines using the airport, and they agreed in a settlement that they would have this limitation on Westchester County Airport, and I say it predated, because it was in the 80s, a federal law that came to be passed in 1990 that gave FAA all local control. So we still have a certain amount of local control, and that's what we environmentalists are upset with Astorino's trying to privatize the airport, because we do not have to expand our airport and take the air and water and noise pollution and traffic issues that accompany all big airports. So we can legally try to keep our airport small. But if we privatized it for 40 years, it's very hard to see that they wouldn't trying to make money off the airport, which the county could get their hands on. They can't now, with this as a non-profit status of the airport. But if it were privatized for 40 years, it's very hard to see that there would not be increased pressure for expansion, because that would increase the amount of money.
So the agreement is with the county.
Well, it's a legal agreement which the Board of Legislators has renewed this resolution for 10 years, first of all, and 20 years, and then 2004. and it's written into the county code.
And the local communities such as Harrison and Greenwich and Purchase and all the other areas around there, they have no input other than being able to speak through the county. They have no direct input that they could do to challenge this.
No, that's true. It's county-owned and county law, but the county executive obviously can have some effect on that. And we feel in the environmental community that the fact that the Board of Legislators was in direct control and directly accountable for the impacts of the airport so that constituents could go to them with their complaints. This is a status that we do not want to have changed, and I don't think anybody who thinks about it very much would like to change either.
What do the leaders of the local towns that are surrounding it feel?
Well, actually, David Gelfarb, who represents Peters area and Rybrook and so forth, is very much on our side now because he does not want the airport expanded. And Catherine Parker in the Board of Legislators, who represents Rye, where I live, and a number of them are very much in favor of not expanding the airport, so that I think the Board of Legislators is where we should bring pressure, because we do not want Astrino to privatize the airport.
Now, I understand we have a caller. Caller, what's your first name and what's your question?
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll negotiate. I'll give you my second name. It's Mr. Cam from New Rochelle.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some out-of-the-box suggestions here. I don't know whether the county can tax gasoline or not, but if we could tax gasoline the way all the other countries do, around $8 to $10 a gallon, there would be a lot less air traffic, because the footprint is very heavy in fossil fuels from gasoline and from cheap gas. So this would cut down the traffic just by supply and demand. People would find other ways to travel instead of roaring around in jets like Trump does.
Especially if they could tailor it so that it was for aviation gasoline, which is a different octane than what we get at the pumps for automobiles.
Well, a general tax on fossil fuels, I think, could easily include aviation fuel. There's no reason why that couldn't happen. I just want to say, too, that the results in Scandinavia, they have 1/3 of our fossil fuel consumption per capita because they pay $10 a gallon. They also have 1/3 less cancer and asthma because of the cleaner air that they're breathing.
Great.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cam. Carolyn, any thoughts and comments?
I would be in favor of that very much, because a tax on carbon fuels generally would certainly limit demand, and that would be a good thing as far as most of our environmentalists assume. And that would be, I would agree with your caller. That would be a good thing.
Ardina?
Speaking of the fossil fuel issue, have there been any impact studies on how the expansion of the airport would affect the surrounding area in terms of pollution, in terms of water runoff, bad water runoff?
Well, the county has worked on the water runoff for decades, and because of its very precarious location, so close to one of our biggest reservoirs, Kensico Reservoir, and I was saying earlier that this would not be allowed as a location nowadays because of the potential environmental impacts on the reservoir. And certainly a lot of studies, and the national environmental groups have studied impacts of airports, and they are, as you would expect, very big on air pollution and water pollution, and so they may, things to fight it.
You'll have to hold the thought there, Carolyn. You're listening to Westchester Eye on the Radio here on WVOX 1460 AM and heard worldwide at WVOX.com. I'm here with Ardina Seward and Peter Moses and our special in-studio guest, Carolyn Cunningham, a lawyer and environmentalist, and we're talking about the impact of the possible expansion of Westchester County Airport, so stay tuned.
And then there was one. 1460 WVOX.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
And we are back with Westchester Eye on the Radio. My co-host, John Sharan, Peter Moses, and our guest today is Carol Cunningham, who is an advocate with an organization called Federated Conservationists of Westchester County. And we're talking about airport.
But before we do that, we do have a caller named Myra. Myra, you with us?
Yes, I am.
What do you want to talk about, Myra?
Hi, I just want to confirm or make clear something that Ms. Cunningham said, which I think is very pointed. She said that one of the concerns about privatization is loss of control by the people of Westchester County. County Executive Astorino often talks about how the fact that the airport now has a professional manager and it's owned by the county, and that if it does undergo privatization, that won't change. That the county will still own the airport.
Well, let's
no different. I wanted to say, let me just make my comment, please. My comment is that it is totally different. Right now, the manager works in our interest. Whatever the county says it's supposed to do, it's supposed to follow through on those instructions. But if there's a lease, it's basically a business agreement between the county and this other party, and there is no room for the public in that kind of discussion.
I agree with you very much. The managers of the county airport at the moment are very much employees, basically, of the county. And the Board of Legislators is the accountable body, and we as constituents can go talk to them about the county. In a 40-year lease, that is very different, and so I would agree with you fully.
I have a question, Carol. Who has the most to lose in this? I mean, is it the property owners in Greenwich who've shelled out millions of dollars for their houses, and now they're going to have to deal with noise and pollution? Is it environmentalists? Who has the most to lose in this?
Well, you've notified or identified some of the people who would be losers, because the whole area around the airport, and that includes Northwest Greenwich, and they have been supporters of keeping the airport not expanded over the years. Very strong supporters that would affect property values with the noise and the traffic and the pollution and so forth. So the area, the radius around the airport probably has the most to lose, but I think the entire county has a lot to lose if we do not pay attention to the fact that we have a unique airport and one that we can legally keep not expanding, and we would all benefit by that because we don't need the impacts, the environmental impacts or the impact on property.
I have a question for you. I'm sure you look with great interest in what is happening in Newburgh, because Stewart has expanded quite a lot. There's farmland up there. There's also aquifers up there, and I'm assuming it's not too far from reservoirs as well. What has it done to Stewart as far as, the area surrounding
I
Stewart?
really am not very familiar with the Stewart, but I must say part of me was happy when part of our pressure was relieved by saying that Stewart and my family, or my husband's family, is from New Paltz, and that's north of Newburgh. But I really don't have much actual information. They're getting a lot more flights, and they have longer runways, so that I think they can do European flights.
They absolutely can. That was one of the designated emergency landing areas for the space shuttle, if it ever had to come down that way. So their runways are very long, and they can do international flights.
Why does your mic sound like you're in a bowling alley? Did you hear that sound?
Don't talk to me, Chief. I'm just talking into the mic.
There's a rumble there someplace. But
there's still a rumble. I think we're all in a bowling alley right now.
Hopefully it's not from the Westchester County Airport.
But did that actually remove a lot of pressure?
Well, I think somewhat, because some flights were transferred to the Newburgh airport, and I don't know the actual figures or the data on it.
There's a flip side of the argument. Most of the airports in Europe are privately owned, and they say that the system is working just fine because it takes the burden off the government to maintain the airports, to maintain the infrastructure. So to play devil's advocate, how would you defend your position based on that?
Well, I frankly don't have information on the European airports, and I assumed a lot of them were government owned as they are in this country.
Carolyn, what's the next step for Westchester?
I think that people who are concerned about this should let their legislators know on the Board of Legislature, the Westchester County Board of Legislators, that they do not want the Westchester County Airport expanded. And if they have any influence with Mr. Astorino, they should let him know as well.
Is there any place where people can go to find out more information, maybe online, about this?
Yes, we have one of our groups, where Federated Conservationists of Westchester County has been around for 50 years, and we have a website, fcwc.org. But one of the new groups, and the Lower Hudson Valley Sierra Club members have information on their website too. But one of the newer is Citizens for a Responsible County Airport, and they also have a website. And so there are a lot of groups opposing this privatization and expansion, and you could go on their websites or on our website too.
There are a few politicians who seem to support this. I believe that David Tubiello was one of them. What about George Latimer?
Oh, well, George has very, very good position on the airport. He is not for expansion, and he's not for privatization.
And he's from Rye, like you.
Yes, I've known George for many years, and he's an honest person, too, and a very caring and thoughtful representative.
Unfortunately, he's a very boring candidate so far, and I don't see him unseating Astorino, even though I vote Democratic for the most part, and I will not vote for Ab Astorino, and I'm friendly with George, but George doesn't inspire a lot of passion with the way he does things. But we can talk about that on the flip side. This is Westchester Eye on the radio on WVOX, WVOX.com. When we come back, I'm going to let John and Ardina finish this up because I, as usual, are speaking too much. And we'll be right back.
something happening at 1460 on Westchester's only local station.
WVOX. Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
And we are back live with Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and our guest today is Carol Cunningham, who's with Federated Conservationists of Westchester. And I believe we have a call on the line. Donald?
Yes, Donald is here.
Donald, well,
what's your question, Donald?
State your case.
I want to support Carolyn. She's absolutely right. But emphasis on getting to the getting to the legislature and get them to realize all the facts that are involved here and what the danger is. And to the one point that you had before, Carolyn, when you said, sure, the damage is all around Westchester, locally around Westchester, but all of Westchester can be impacted by this. One example would be if something should happen to the reservoir right 500, 600 feet from the runway.
Right.
If something should happen to that runway, to that water supply, it would cost the citizens of all of Westchester billions of dollars to filter that New York City water supply.
That's very true, and that's a point that the Sierra Club makes over and over again when we speak on these issues about the airport, because we have had a couple small planes fall into the reservoir in my life in Westchester, which is going on to 48 years in Westchester County. And so it's possible, and the nearness of the airport to the big Kensico Reservoir would not be allowed today. The airport started in the 1940s when we didn't have those kind of environmental regulations. So you are very, very accurate and true.
Has the specter of increased property taxes, been raised as leverage against getting this passed?
Well, one of his arguments is if privatization were to occur, would be the chance that he could get some money from the county treasury, which now goes to the airport. But I think, all that you would lose in accountability and in our special ability to keep the airport small would be lost in the privatization. So it's not worth it in the balance sheet, I think.
But why hasn't there been a referendum on this?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure the answer to that. But, basically because I guess the county legislators have been mostly opposed. And so they don't want a referendum on it, I think, and they would have to bring the referendum.
So with a straw poll today, you think that the county legislators would probably be against it?
Well, that's a good question, and we have been going to see them individually and trying to educate them if they are, from a northern county town or some place in Yonkers. But they drink part of the water, too. The Kensico Reservoir serves primarily New York City, but Westchester uses some of the Kensico Reservoir water, too. So that I think every bit of the county should be aware of where it is and what we have to lose if we let this airport expand.
If the city of New York is involved, how come they're not involved in trying to champion keeping the airport small and public, rather?
I'm not sure if they have been. DEP was New York City. DEP was very much involved when we were trying to prevent their major cutting of trees around the airport, unnecessary trees. Obviously, ones right around the runways have to be cut. But DEP has not surfaced in this, to my knowledge. But on the other hand, maybe some of the environmentalists have gone to talk to them because they're very concerned about Kensico Reservoir.
Has the Pilots Association weighed in on the argument?
I believe Citizens for a Responsible Airport, Jonathan Wang, who is in charge of there, is a private pilot, and I think he said that the private pilots are not for privatization.
Well, because either way, it would increase congestion, and when you have congestion, there's always a safety factor.
Well, that's very true, and it would increase congestion on the ground and more traffic to the airport and parking problems and so forth. And one of the ways that the airport will make money is that one of the parking garages begins to pay the county after 2024. And I haven't focused on that enough to know the facts for sure, but we began to get revenue from that parking garage in 2024.
Carol, I was just going to say, Carolyn, to give our listeners another chance to find out more information, could you repeat where those some of those websites they can go
I
to?
would be happy to, because I get a chance to tout FCWC's website. And FCWC, if you go on our website, fcwc.org, this is a member organization of environmentalists throughout the county. And we have member organizations, about 60 or so, 50 or 60 organizations like nature centers and Audubon chapters and so forth. But we have individual members, and you can join. But also Sierra Club Lower Hudson chapter would have information on the airport, and Citizens for a Responsible Airport, they have a website that you could go on and learn more about these issues.
And you have a fundraiser coming up.
Yes, we do, and I'm so happy that you mentioned it. FCWC needs money for our small staff, and so we usually have a benefit, and this benefit is going to be 2 sails on the Clearwater. And if you haven't been on the Clearwater, you should, because it's a replica of a freight-carrying sloop that actually was on the Hudson River before, and our sail is September 24th, and it will leave from Yonkers.
When is your fundraiser?
September 24th.
Oh, it's the same. It's the same.
September 24th, and 2 sails. One will sail and they leave from the pier in Yonkers, or next to the big pier, and there will be a 10 o'clock sail and a 2 o'clock sail of the lower Hudson River.
September 24th is a famous day in New York baseball history. John's laughing because he knows what it is.
What is it?
On September 24th, 1969, the New York Mets clinched their first division title.
Really?
And it is next to the birth of my daughter, and more so than my wedding day, more so than my birthday or anybody else's birthday. September 24th is my happiest day of the year. So maybe I'll have to find a way to get on the sloop that day. I know Pete Seeger was a major benefactor in that being restored.
Absolutely.
Okay, the fix is in, Peter. The fix is in.
Who do we have next? Who do you have next week?
We have Brina Clark, who is the founder of the Hobart Women's Writers Festival. So you don't have to be a woman to listen. I mean, tune in, folks. This is a very dynamic event that happens every year in upstate New York, and Brina is a great writer. So we want to see you on the show.
Good. Thank you.